let's get back to Simon. Simon is a person who has experienced the blessings of God. God had healed him. He was no respecter of persons. When Simon came to him as the leper, Christ reached out and touched him and healed him. And the interesting thing is that Simon, in response to this beautiful healing of Christ, invites Jesus and the disciples and also Lazarus to his home. The person he doesn't invite is the person that we see here. And so Simon here invites Jesus to have dinner with him. And it says there in verse 37, when a woman who had lived a sinful life in the town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume. And as she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. So we have this whole experience, and we're going to be talking about this woman now. But we have the experience of Simon here and his reaction. Now remember, he was a leper, the untouchable. Here he looks at this woman and he looks at her with scorn as one who is untouchable. But there's a lot that one can say about this, because he was actually part and parcel of those who actually led her, this woman, into sin. But that's a story for another time. But he looks down on this woman. Now I want you to notice, and we're not talking about Simon here either. That's not the person that I want you to get involved with. I want to talk about the person that Christ draws Simon's attention to. He says, verse 41, 2 men owed money to a certain moneylender. Now, Christ had just addressed Simon. Remember, he said to him, Simon, I have something to tell you. And Simon says, I'm all ears. Christ then starts off and he says, verse 41, 2 men owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. So let's make that real. 500 rand, the other one 50. Okay. You know, dear friends, in the world that we're living in now, the world and the amount that the world owes, each of us individually owes certain amounts to different people that we owe money to. Do you understand? Maybe it's for a house. Maybe it's for a car. Maybe it's for, a gift that, not a gift, a food parcel we received, or maybe it was money that we lent. But each of us owes money in some way to a lender of money. Do you understand this? I want to make this real to us. One owes 500 rand. Now we would think, wow, that bloke really owes a lot of money. The other one owes 50 rand. We might say, well, that's a little. But both owe money. And dear friends, one of the things that we're going to experience in the world that we're living in is that people are going to find themselves in situations where some might owe a small amount of money and it's easy to resolve, but others are going to owe big amount of money and they can't resolve that. How are they going to do it? And it's at that time that they're going to find themselves at the mercy of those who lent the money. Now Jesus tells the story. One man owed this man 50 rand, the other one owed him 500 rand. Do you have the picture? Neither of them, verse 42, had the money to pay him back. So he cancelled the debts of both. Then the question is asked, now which of them will love him more? Now, the answer which Simon gives him, which is correct, he says, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt cancelled. Dear friends, I want you to listen to this. We're really talking about money here and a person who lent money, and I want us to really stay with us for a while before I make it maybe more personal in another sense. But each one of us is in some way indebted to somebody. And the sad part about this whole lockdown thing is that we are at the mercy of those who've lent us money because we're not earning money. How do we behave? Now it says the one who had 500 rand, couldn't pay it, and the one who had 50 rand. And I want you to understand, dear friends, that there are businesses out there that need a massive amount of money in order to carry themselves. And that money, most of them are living on what we call overdraft facilities offered by banks. And yet the banks turned around and have offered to people who owe them money leniency. I want you to understand this. What will we do when people owe us money? How will we behave? And I want to tell you that if it's the survival of the richest, then dear friends, those of us who are poor are going to suffer. You see, we are going to be at the mercy of those who've lent us money. We are going to be at that mercy. I just heard recently of one of, I don't know if it's a member of the church, even if it's not, that was going to be evicted from their home because they couldn't pay what they had to pay. Dear friends, what should we be doing if we are in a position to help? Man, I would not want to be the person who decides the fate of that person. So here we see the interesting thing that Christ does. He brings out this thing. He says one owed a lot, one owed a little. Yet both owed. And yet, the amazing thing about this is not the people who owed the money. I don't want our attention to be drawn, because this is what happens here. In this story, we find out that the person that is focused on are the two people who owed the money and their acceptance of it. And here we find out that God is using this to try and bring out that although Simon maybe thought he owed a little and Mary owed a lot, both of them were forgiven by Christ. And both of them walked away from that situation happy, saved. But I want to take this story about this man a little further, and I want you to focus with me for a moment, not on the people who were indebted to somebody, but the person who actually lent the money. The question that popped into my mind was, how was it possible that this man could give them both pardon? How is it that he could cancel both of their debts? How could he do that? And the thought that came to my mind was maybe he had too much money. But that is not the reason here. What I pick up very clearly here is that this man looked in empathy, in sympathy upon these two. He knew that they were at his mercy. And what he does is he reveals through his actions that he loved the people more than he loved the money. And the time period that we are moving into, because there is going to be a financial meltdown, is going to reveal if we really love people or if we love money. Now, in Timothy, Paul writes that the love of money is sinful, not having money. It's where we love money more than we love people. And I wonder if we find ourselves on the side, not of the ones who owe, because the ones who owe and they get forgiven, we all sigh a massive relief. I mean, the interesting thing is that government has decided to increase the grants to people by 250 rand for the next 6 months. Now, the reason why they can only do it for 6 months is because if they carry on doing it, they will run out of finances. But what is interesting to me, the test is really going to come when all of that has been depleted. Will we love people more than we love money? Or will our love for money just react on us in such a way that our treatment of others will be bad? Now, dear friends, unless you have faith, unless you believe that it is God who provides, you will never be that wellspring where the water keeps coming out. But God's people, those who've accepted Him, are those well springs. Somehow, like the woman and Elijah, every time she goes back to the pot, there will be flour and there will be oil. But that does not come without an experience with Christ, where you believe that, where it's by faith you know that He provides. And this woman takes the most expensive gift that she has, and according to a Pharisee, Simon, who had received the mercies of God, he looked at it as if she was wasting her treasures. Even Judas, one of his disciples, considered that that could have been sold and the money used in some other way. But you know, the interesting thing is that nobody can dictate to us how we use our money. And what Mary did is she revealed the true heart of the giver. She realized that her treasure was Christ, and that she poured out her treasure on him, and knew that that would never satisfy him. And Jesus turns around and he says to Simon, Simon, I came to your home. You didn't even wash my feet. You didn't even anoint my head. You haven't done any of this, but this woman has given everything. And dear friends, I want you to look at the conclusion of this whole story. Jesus turns to the woman. Remember, she's been embarrassed there. Simon is looking at her. Everybody's looking at her. Her hair's hanging down. Do you know that the fact that her hair was hanging down was a tradition that only prostitutes fulfilled? Women who let their hair down were seen as prostitutes. And Mary, by dropping her hair and wiping his feet, was doing something that made everybody look at her. And as even Simon said, you know, if he only knew who was touching her. He knew who was touching her because he had been with her. And here he saw himself somebody better. And yet he was at the mercy of God as much as Mary was. And the interesting thing, Jesus recognizes this. And I want to tell you something. The person that we need to focus on here is not the people who've received pardon or forgiveness or healing, but on the beautiful character quality of the person who forgave. I want you to notice this. Jesus took note of every hidden secret in that woman's heart. He knew that she had just given the treasures that would have been looking after her for a long period of time. He knew that she had given her treasures to him. He knew what she had gone through, how that he had cast the demon out of her 7 times. He knew that. He knew that she was more grateful for the gift of salvation than what Simon was. And I wonder, dear friends, how many of us really know what we have and how grateful we should be for the gifts that we have. And if those gifts are finances, how grateful we should be for that. And are we willing to give to those like this man? Do we love people more than we love money? Jesus turns around and he turns to the woman. You know, just another thought that comes to my mind is this, that Christ had no place to call his own. Foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And yet what Christ gave is what none of us could ever earn. He gave salvation. He turns to this woman and he notices what she's done for him. He sees everything, dear friends. He sees what's hidden in the secrets of our hearts. And he says to the woman, verse 50, and I'm closing off with this. Jesus said to the woman, listen to this. Her actions had revealed who she was, and who she was somebody that God was willing to save. Your faith, which was revealed in your actions, has saved you. Listen to that, dear friends. Your faith has saved you. And as James says, faith without actions is nothing. And our actions, if that is what's revealing our faith, some of us really need to look at our faith again. Because the kind of faith that we are exercising is not the faith that saves. This woman's faith, Jesus makes it very clear, Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. You see, Christ blesses her, gives her the assurance of salvation because she was doing the right things. She put her treasure, she put her heart where her treasure was. And her heart was in Christ's hands. And I want you to understand that when I look at this, we will reveal where our treasures are by our actions. And may God help us to be like the money lender, that we will be willing to allow people freedom, that they won't be fearful that if they don't pay they're going to be evicted. That we will have the heart of what Christ had, and that is that we will be willing to forgive, to send away and say, peace be with you.